this is your teacher M, Miss Malyari, to help you with your homework. So this video is about homework help for DMR number 1. So let's start with item number 1. You have to read what it says. It says, write the fraction as a percent. What I'm gonna do is give you an example that is close to 90 over 100, just like what you have here. So what I'm gonna have here, let's say I have 80 over 100. If I'm being asked to write this fraction as a percent, I should know that anything that is 100 at the bottom can be written as a percent right away. So this 80 can be written as 80%. Okay, so remember the bottom number 100 means percent. Now let's move on to item number 2. On item number 2, it says write the percent as a fraction in simplest form or lowest term fraction, and the given percent is 20%. So it's like a reverse of what we did on item number 1. We were given a fraction out of 100, we wrote it as a percent. Now that we are given a percent number, we have to write it as a fraction first, okay? And then we will simplify it. So instead of me working on that 20%, I will give you something that is close to that. So let's say I have 24%. So you know that a percent means out of 100. So at the bottom, you're going to write down 100, and that number should be on top of the 100. Now we have to simplify by dividing both number by the same factor. So let me just remind you again that percent means out of 100. That's why we wrote the 24% as a fraction, 24 out of 100. Now let's simplify 24 out of 100. We say we can divide both by 2. So 24 divided by 2, it's like getting half of 24. So if we divide 24 by 2, you divide first the first digit by your divisor. It can be done. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract that 0. Bring down the next digit. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract that 0. So you go back here on the fraction that we're trying to simplify. 24 divided by 2 is equivalent to 12. So our top number is 12. What about 100 divided by 2? So let's divide the 10 first by 2. And you know 2 can go into 10 5 times. So you write down your answer on top of that 10, on the top of the 0. Then multiply by the divisor. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract down here, you have a 0. Now you have an extra 0 on that 100. You have to bring it down. And if you brought down a number, even though it's a 0, you have to have an answer on the top. 0 divided by 2 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Subtract. Therefore, 100 divided by 2 here is 50. So this is a simpler form of 24 over 100. But don't you think that 12 and 50 can still be divided by 2? So we can still simplify this further. So 12 divided by 2 will give you half of 12, which is 6. And 50 divided by 2, it's like 50 cents. Divided by 2 people, you're going to have 25 cents. Or $50 divided by 2 is 25. Now, as you can see, 6 is an even number, while 25 that ends with 5 is an odd number. That means you can no longer divide these two numbers by 2. And therefore, this is our simplest form and your final answer. Okay? So now we're done with item number 2. You should have an idea what to do on that item number 2 now that you have an example. Let's move on to item number 3 here. So it says on number 3, change the fraction to a percent. But there's a hint. Use the strategy top in bottom out, or TIBO. So I'll give you another example. Instead of me using that 1/5, I will have 3/5. So how do you change a fraction to a decimal and then a percent? You have to use this strategy, top in bottom out, or TIBO. So you have to put the number up this one inside the division box, just like what it says, stop in. Then the bottom number goes out. That bottom number 5 should be down here outside the division box. Now you can tell that 5 cannot go into 3, so your answer on top of 3 is 0, because 3 divided by 5 is 0. Now you can make that 3 bigger, just like what we said during our class. We can add a 0, but before you add a 0, make sure you have a decimal point here and straight up here. Okay? Then you can add 1 0. So now 30 divided by 5 is 6. How do I know it's 6? I skip counted by 5. So when I skip counted by 5, I had 5, 10, 15, 20, and I didn't stop until I get to 30. 25, 30, and I counted, that is 6 times. Okay, so my answer here on the 10th place value is 6. Multiply that by 5. 6 times 5 is 30. Subtract that 0. So the decimal form of 3/5 is 0.6. Okay? But then we have to change it to 8%, just like what it says here on the question. So you have to remember this. To change a decimal to a percent, simply move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So it's like grabbing that point, grabbing it one time to the right, and then another because it has to be 2 spaces. So now the point will end up here. But there's no number here on this space here. There should be a digit. So what are we going to do is simply add a 0. Now let's rewrite our number as a percent. Now that we have moved that decimal point twice to the right over here, therefore it shouldn't be there anymore. So you have to write down the 6, the number we added, and that decimal point. And don't forget, it's now in percent form. Therefore, our 3/5 is equivalent to 60%. And that's what you're supposed to do on this 1/5. Top in, bottom out. Then move the decimal point twice to the right. Then write it as a percent with the percent symbol. Now, just quickly before we move on to item number 4, just imagine this is your score on a test or on a short quiz. You got 3 correct out of a total of 5 items. So your grade will be what? A 60%. Unlike if you have a perfect score of 5 out of 5, it's going to be 100%. Since you only got 3 correct out of 5, your grade will be this one. Okay, so it can be applied in real life, these fractions and the percents. So on number 4, it says the sign below shows the prices at the school store. So this is the table. The question is, what is the total cost of 4 highlighters, 3 notebooks, 2 pencils, and an eraser? This should be an easy problem for you because you already are doing this in real life. I'm not going to do what it says here, but I'm going to come up with a different number of pencils and erasers, okay? For the sake of having an example. For example, I need 5 pencils, okay? And I know that each pencil is 20 cents. So I know 20 cents is written this way in decimal. Multiply it by 5. Then I'm going to have, let's see, 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 2 is 10. Carry 1. 5 times 0 is 0 plus 1. Okay? Then there are 2 numbers behind decimal point. On my final answer, I have I should place 2 numbers behind decimal point. So, 5 pencils will cost me $1. Then I have to keep on doing that for whatever they're asking me on the question. Then add everything up so I can get the total price or costs for everything. Okay? Now let's move on to item number 5. Let me read. It says, Andy needs 3.5 yards of fabric for her dress. How is 3.5 expressed as a fraction? So there's always a hint there. All you have to do is read it. Check the correct place value to use as your denominator because they want it as a fraction. Okay? So the given decimal is 3.5. So I'm going to use a different decimal, 6.2. So we know that the 6 is the whole number, which is on the ones place value, while the 2 here behind the decimal point is on the tenths place. So 6 being the whole, you have to write it big, and then there will be a fraction on the side. That fraction will have a 2 on top because it says 2 tenths. So tenths means 10 at the bottom. So this is my mixed number now. Or I can simplify this by dividing the 2 and the 10 by the same factor. Because both are even numbers, I can divide by 2. Okay? So, what is a simpler form of 2 tenths? 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Then don't forget the whole number, it belongs here on the side. Therefore, this could be my final answer in simplest form. But if they don't have this simplest form, maybe on the answer choices, they have this one. So you figure out what will be the 3.5 amongst A, B, C choices here on item number 5. So on number 6, it says 20% of the students brought lunch to school. What fraction of the students did not bring lunch to school? Okay, now since the one given on the problem is 20%, I'm changing our example to a 60%, okay? So the ones who brought lunch to school on my example is 60% instead of 20. So now if I add that number to this other percentage, okay, who are the students who did not bring lunch to school, if I add these two numbers, it should always equal to 100%. Now it's like an elementary problem wherein you have a 60 plus an empty box, a missing number, that will equal to 100. So what would you do to find that missing number? Of course, you have to do the opposite of add, which is subtract. You have to subtract the 60 from the bigger number 100. And we know that 100 minus 60 is 40. So now that we know what is that missing number, we can check it out. You can go ahead and add 60 plus 40 and you know it's going to equal to 100. Okay, that's how you know your answer is correct. So we go back here. Now we know that those students who did not bring lunch to school is those 40%. But on the question, they want it in fraction form. So now we have to take that 40%, write it, and change it to a fraction. And we know that percent means 100 at the bottom. So any number written as a percent, you can write it as a fraction with 100 at the bottom. In this case, that's going to be 40 out of 100. But they said that the fraction should be in simplest form. So how do we simplify 40 out of 100? Since both are ending with 0, we can both divide by a number, by a factor that ends with a 0. We can divide both by 10 or by a 20. Let's try dividing by 10. So 40 divided by 10 is 4. 100 divided by 10 is 10. And yet this one is still not yet in simplest form, because 4 tenths can still be simplified by dividing both number, top and bottom, by 2. So let's divide both by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And now as you can see, the top number is an even number and the bottom number is an odd number. There's no way we can simplify this further. So therefore, this is our final answer in simplest form. This fraction is our final answer. Now that I've given you examples for each item on the top on page 1, therefore on page 2, it's going to be easy for you or easier for you to do each item because they're just the same exact questions or problems. We just change the numbers, okay? So I'm going to count on you that you're going to do your best. You can always rewind this video and learn from the examples. Remember, you're doing page 1 and page 2 of this homework. Thank you so much for watching this video and good luck. I'll see you in class. Bye.